Welcome to the Accelerate Campfire. I'm Lyndon Bowen, and today I'm joined by an amazing entrepreneur. I truly hope you enjoy hearing their experiences and life path. Listen in. So, Lydia Michael is the founder of Blended Collective, an award-winning multicultural marketing and branding consultancy offering B2B and B2C services. Lydia focuses on helping brands reach and engage diverse audiences and customers through brand, content, and marketing strategy development, which requires an authentically and culturally engaging approach, something needed desperately today more than ever. Her experience includes working with brands like Deloitte and L'Oreal. Please, guys, without further ado, give a warm GIF or emoji welcome to Lydia Michael today. We're bringing her to the campfire. So, Lydia, thank you for being here. Everyone's going to drop in emojis and GIFs into the channel since this is an audio-only experience. So, feel
It's a
free to
little bit
peek in there and see all the welcomes.
nice seeing you all. Nice being here.
So it looks like we actually have the first question in here from the poll. So the audience is curious to know, what was your first job?
My first job, I was an English tutor when I was still living in Germany. So I was teaching high school students English
How long did you actually live in Germany?
all throughout high school, actually. So I was born and raised in Germany, came here right when I sort of finished high school in Germany, but then did another high school year here in the US.
And what was the last job that you had before you started Blended Collective?
That's also when I was still in Germany. Actually, I had gone back a second time for grad school. So I was working at L'Oreal, and that's the company I ended up doing my master thesis with during my international MBA program out in Germany. And so that was the last job that I had before I came to the US and started this journey here.
Yeah. So Ziz, a member of our collective, is actually curious to know, what was your high school experience like? You mentioned like going to high school in Germany versus like moving here to the US. Is there anything that kind of like stuck with you that you brought to your entrepreneurial endeavors?
You want me to describe my high school experience? Is it in Germany or in the US?
In Germany.
Oh, very, very intense. High school in Germany, probably in Europe, is very different than in the US because if you compare the systems, you probably have the 2 years of college here where you do all of your general education classes. That is integrated into high school in Germany. So it's a lot more difficult. But it says US. He's asking me to
Oh yeah, I
describe
think he wanted US. Yeah. Mhm.
so yeah, in comparison to Germany, in hindsight, I think I'm very thankful for the experience because it was very different. Um, and it was because I came here for my senior year. So you can imagine your senior year, everybody already has their own cliques and their groups. And, I was the German girl coming into high school in the senior year. So it was challenging, to say the least. But I'm very thankful for it because I think I learned a lot, not just about myself, in terms of adjusting to a new environment and being open-minded, and all of those qualities that eventually were helpful when I started the business.
You mentioned like a really good point about open-mindedness. Like, how did your experience like working with Deloitte and L'Oreal, like, are those kind of like open-minded environments? And if so, if not, like, how did that impact your work with Blended Collective?
Well, and they were both very different. Deloitte is traditional consultancy, so things are a little bit more linear, and certain processes that you have to follow. I'm definitely thankful for both of those experiences because they were very different from one another, but they both helped me learn so much from when I started Blended Collective. Then, as a result, and both of those projects, by the way, I did when I had gone back to Germany for grad school. And so they were, parallel to that is when I did those. Working at L'Oreal, I would say yes, is very open-minded because yes, while you do have to follow processes and structure and all of those things, it's a very creative environment. So I was in product marketing, working on a hair care brand, those green shampoo bottles, Fructis, Garnier
Yeah.
Fructis,
Mhm.
if you're familiar with. It was a very fun and creative environment. So I'd say it was definitely more open-minded and allowed me to live a lot of those attributes.
Mm. And like, I mean, I as an entrepreneur, like, how did you build a company like you have currently, with those open-minded and like collaborative, creative, like aspects to it? Like, what was your process in terms of like building your team, to have that entrenched inside of your company?
For Before I think about open-mindedness and creativeness and all of those different things, um, what was really to connect with people that align with the core values that we have at Blended Collective. So authenticity, culture, and diversity, those were things that were really important for us as we were building a brand, making a name for ourselves in the community, but also taking on client work, or past speaker event series that we were hosting here in the Metro Detroit area. Those were all things that we wanted to align with, were those values. So I think that was more important, I would say.
And what was the big idea that you were chasing after when you founded Blended Collective? You mentioned, finding the right team, finding the right values, finding the right team that had those values. What were those values that you wanted to instill? I guess I'd ask.
Back to the whole, not just my passion for culture and diversity, through my upbringing in Germany. I grew up in a very multicultural environment. I have a Middle Eastern background, but obviously grew up in Germany and then came to the US. So navigating three different cultures all of my life was not just a challenge, but it was also really a reward because I learned so much from other people. So in business, I wanted to be able to merge my past experience in international global marketing with my passion for culture. And I didn't really know how to do that. And at some point throughout my journey, I had a small side business where we were providing culturalistic training services to automotive expatriates that spent a significant amount of time here in the US. So while I loved doing that type of work, I didn't really see it flourishing into something full time. And so I, faced myself with the question of what does it look like? What does your journey look like from here on? And so again, taking marketing and culture and putting that under the same roof is something that I wanted to do. And with a little bit more research, I actually learned that multicultural marketing was a thing. It was something that corporations were actually doing and they were
Yeah.
focused on. You see it a lot in the automotive industry, especially now here being in Detroit, because a lot of those automotive companies work with who are focused on African American, marketing, or Asian American or Hispanic, whatever it might be, right? All of those different agencies, but you didn't really see it for the startup world and the small businesses. And I was like, I really think that there's a gap to help the smaller businesses focus on multicultural marketing because it's just as important as it is for, the big guys.
And what would you say is like the common pitfall, that these companies experience, before you guys come in and actually consult and give them the tools that they need to properly, address those markets?
Goes back to doing enough research and understanding who your target market is, right? So not trying to be everything to everyone. So really helping them understand who their target market is, who is it that they're trying to reach, and why are they trying to reach them, and sometimes even opening their eyes to maybe another market that they didn't realize was potential for them.
Who was the actual first client for your company?
Interesting question. So it was XO Advisory Consulting. It was a small consultancy actually, which is funny because we're a consultancy as well. Um, but it was a
All in the
lady that,
family.
yeah, exactly. Um, it was HR consultant who had been in the automotive space for a very long time, and she was moving into her early retirement age, and she wanted to build something on her own and work with small businesses. And so we helped her develop the brand and her identity for the business.
Consulting's helping me consultants, right? It's just like you need a consultant for your consultant. Um,
Exactly.
right. What would you say is how would you explain to like a startup founder, right, who may not think about the importance of like marketing to different cultures? How would you explain to them the importance of like working with a company like yours, or even putting thought into how they talk to different cultures about their product?
To go back at some of the stats that are publicly known at this point, that by 2044, and this is according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 50% of the U.S. population will be multicultural. And if you think about those numbers, it means that half every other in the U.S. is going to be of either African American, Asian American, or Latin descent, right? And when you think about that as a business and as a brand, you understand how relevant and important it is to really focus your marketing around reaching these groups. I mean, we look at 2044, that's about 20 years from now, you know? So if brands are not focused on reaching and engaging audiences now, because it's not something that you can just do overnight. It takes time, right? It takes time to understand these audiences, to position your brand a certain way, to implement certain initiatives and strategies to be able to reach them, engage with them, and really make sure that they're choosing you over anybody else. And so, it goes back to a lot of those stats essentially, and this is why it's so important. So it doesn't matter if you're a one-man show or if you're a corporation with thousands and thousands of employees. It's something that everybody needs to figure out and understand. How can I connect with these diverse audiences?
And if there were like two or three tips you would give, Ziz like says like he agrees with you, like the future is multicultural. Like what would be two tips? Like you mentioned like reaching out to these communities, starting early. What would be two more tips you would give to people who are thinking about how to address the future of our country and in the world?
Just utilizing your own circle, your own network, and it doesn't have to be a business circle. If you look at your group of friends, family, is there any multiculturalism that you can tap into? Are there learnings that you can take away from that? Can you go and ask a friend, about certain ideas that you have and see how that resonates with them? Because a lot of times we don't understand certain groups or certain cultures, but we get ahead of ourselves and we start to promote and talk, publicly, and sometimes that can backfire, right? So really utilizing your close resources that you have, I would say.
So we actually have the next question for you here, Lydia, as well. In your journey as an entrepreneur, what would you say was the biggest mistake and or learning lesson that you made, in the 5 years of business? You mentioned that you guys had an anniversary recently, 5 years, which is super exciting, by the way. But in those 5 years, yeah, go ahead. What was the biggest mistake that you encountered?
Yeah. So I would say, probably was right before I started Blended Collective, but it's tied to starting the company. And it would be not believing that I was ready to start the company. Because I had a very, I don't know if I would call it challenging, but maybe a bit. So when I moved back from Germany, I had just graduated from my international MBA program. And for some reason in my mind, I convinced myself that I was not ready to be an entrepreneur or to start my own business. I knew that in the long run, that's what I wanted to do. But for some reason, we do these silly things where we tell ourselves we're not ready and we have to go back out into the world to gain more experience, right? And so for the longest time, I think it was about 6 to 9 months before I started the company in 2017, I actually spent a lot of time applying for jobs, right? Applying for even corporate jobs. And I never really was into corporations. I was always, into small businesses. I was working with an entertainment management firm, in the music industry for 5 years. And so I was always really excited about starting something from scratch and building something, to become something larger. And so I ignored that though. I felt like for some reason I had to go back into the corporate world or, get a big girl's job for, the next 2 to 3 years to gain more and more experience. So I'm ready then to start my own company. But none of that actually worked out. And it's funny how things happen because looking back, I'm so happy that none of those opportunities worked out or that I wasn't passionate about, the ones that I did get, because it really pushed me to look inside myself and think about what my future looks like. And a lot of that is how the collective came together. After 9 months, I think, of doing that, of applying for jobs, the longer that process took, I got more disenchanted with the process and thought to myself, well, maybe this is a sign for me to actually do this now and really believe in myself and just push myself, like just do it. What's the worst that can happen? And so, yeah, I think the mistake was really not believing in myself right from the get-go, or believing that, I don't want to say, I did believe in myself. I didn't believe that I was ready at that time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Lydia, I'd say you're definitely not alone in those sentiments. Like, that's something that a lot of our speakers have expressed, and something that a lot of people in our collective deal with every day. So, thank you for being so candid and sharing that experience with us all. I think there's a lot to be gleaned from that. Trust your gut, lean in, keep going. And I think this is saying, don't be the saboteur to yourself, right?
Yeah, but it all starts with us, right? It all starts with what we tell ourselves and what we convince ourselves of. So,
we actually had a follow-up question here in the chat. Ziz was curious to know the difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion and multicultural marketing.
such a good question. I've talked about that in many other settings and workshops too. So a lot of times diversity, equity, and inclusion is more so tied to a lot of the internal efforts that companies have. So whether you look at, your employee, the workforce, those types of things. And when we talk about multicultural marketing, it's a lot more external, right? So how are you actually transitioning all of the DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion that you have in-house? How is that translating externally when you're connecting with your consumers, right? And a lot of times that ends up being the multicultural marketing that you have. So, and that's where we're also a little bit unique, because we try to connect the dots between your internal DEI efforts with the external multicultural marketing, because we've seen a lot of times that companies they might succeed in one or the other, but it's really hard to do both, right? So you could see a company putting out really good multicultural marketing and being so diverse in their marketing, but then you hear from their employees that behind closed doors, it's not mirrored, right? Yeah. Or vice versa. And so that's where we really try to stress the importance of, you really need to look at both, and you need to figure out a strategy that connects both of these internal and external worlds.
I feel like I'm just taking copious notes. I'm learning so much. Thank you, Lydia. Honestly, this is a well of knowledge. We actually have the final question for you here today from the audience, which is, what is some advice that you often share with entrepreneurs?
Much. Where do I start? I think I think for me, looking back, a lot of the main reason why I started Blended Collective, I think, was a source of passion, but also experience, right? So a lot of times we hear, well, you really have to be passionate about what you do and the money will follow. Well, yes, to a certain extent, but you also have to be realistic about what's needed in the market, and does that align with your skill set, So passion is definitely up there. But I think now, looking back, and we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary in September, like you said, and just enjoying the journey. I think sometimes we're so focused on what is the result and what's the return, and I'm not saying that none of those things are important, because they are, but really enjoying the journey, enjoying the process for what it is, and really having fun with whatever it is that you're doing. There's so many lessons I want to share. I don't know. I don't know when to stop. You stop me. But a big one too is, I think, being vulnerable. That is so important, because that's the one thing where I think I've been able to really grow the business, is because I've never been afraid to ask for help, whether it was a past professor or a mentor of mine or somebody that I just connected with you know, through doing research on LinkedIn, and finding that they were the person that I needed to speak to for whatever project. I always asked for help, and I never shy away from that. I'm just as much as I ask for help, right? So the whole giving and taking, I think balancing giving and taking as you're building your business, because not only are you seeking value from other people and other companies, but you also have to give that value back, right? And I think there are ways for us to constantly do that and be in that space, and yeah, just being vulnerable and admitting your mistakes. And that's really the best way to grow, not just on your own, but also through your business.
I mean, Lydia, I think that resonates with me so much, particularly because that's exactly what we strive to do here every day in the collective. A lot of the entrepreneurs, go to our Ask and Answer questions, and they make themselves vulnerable to ask the difficult questions sometimes, and the collective comes around and really, helps them out in times of need. So, I mean, that resonates with me so much, like the point of being vulnerable, the point of like needing a tribe, the point of, crowdsourcing insight and information and not being afraid to ask those questions and something to say that you don't know sometimes, right? So, I mean, I think so many of those things resonate with me.
For sure.
I know we often talk about like what were the biggest mistakes, but you talked about the journey and enjoying the journey. So I want to ask you, like, what has been the most encouraging or like an inspiring thing that you've experienced in your journey? It's 5 years in business, working at L'Oreal, working at Deloitte, like all the experience that you've accumulated. What's been the thing that stuck with you the most, I'd say.
From those experiences, or now in running the business?
All of the above. Let's leave it open. I'll let you decide.
I think it's a question. Really just loving what you do. Sometimes people ask me, well, how, do you think you're going to run Blended Collective for the rest of your life? And I always say, I don't know. And then I think they, are a little bit shocked, but I think, say to myself, I'm going to do this as long as I'm passionate about it. And the day that I don't find the desire to do what I'm doing, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'll find something else. And I think just having that attitude, that positive attitude, no matter what you're working on and what you're working towards, I think just reminds you that everything is going to work out. You don't have to be so hard on yourself, and you don't have to pretend that you want to be in the same role you're in for the next 30, 40 years, right? We can just do whatever we want to do. I mean, we evolve, right? And so does the business. The business evolves, and I'm evolving, and the business is evolving with me. And maybe in 10 years, I want to do something else, and that's okay. I'm still going to be me, right? So I think just not being as hard on yourself and just enjoying the process and being passionate about whatever you're doing, and connecting with interesting people while you're doing all of that.
Well, Lydia, I just want to say thank you again for hopping in and sharing your insight, sharing your baby with us today, which is Blended Collective. I think I've learned a lot. Multicultural marketing is definitely on my radar today now, and I'm like taking notes. I'm like, oh wow, interesting. I need to think about that more. And I think you've also dropped a lot of nuggets that our entrepreneurs can take into their business on the day-to-day to help them as well.
So yeah.
So I'm going to throw that question back to the collective as well, guys. Feel free to drop in the chat as you're leaving out something that you are grateful for, something that has been very inspirational to you in your journey as entrepreneurs. Lydia has taken the time to share that with us today, so please drop that in the chat as well. And also give a warm thank you to Lydia for taking the time out to join us today. So, Lydia, thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Lyndon and Leslie. Love being here.
If you'd like to join the Accelerate Collective and attend future campfires, visit accelerateamerica.com/join and check out our future guest at accelerateamerica.com/campfire. Take care.